Christian schools, churches and charities will not be able to operate according to the Christian ethos on issues of marriage and the scientific truth about gender. But maybe all this pressure on Christians is a good thing. Our vision for human flourishing through marriage and family will never change, no matter what foolish politicians mandate at the behest of radical activists. This is an opportunity for light to shine because the Judeo-Christian vision is better. Politicians might be trying to snuff it out, but they won't succeed. As history shows, there will always be dissidents who will uphold the truth. Today is a day for dissidents. Some of us might have to pay a price to keep freedom alive, but it is a price worth paying. The time is fast arriving when peaceful civil disobedience may be necessary. If we care about the truth of marriage, faith, family, life and freedom, we will start preparing ourselves now. That's why the Family First political party is being revived. We simply must have a political vehicle to carry the truth and to carry our better vision for human flourishing into our parliaments and into the public discourse. I hope you will join us in that quest.
Hi, perhaps you recognize me. It's your favorite president.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
Anybody in this country doesn't minimise their tax. They want their heads rid.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III.
The answer is Mike, because I want to do you slowly. I was saved by God to make America great again.
We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. My name is Stephen Tripp. Thank you to everyone who is watching. If you are watching this live, you can contribute to tonight's conversation in the chat on Facebook, Rumble and YouTube. And if you are in there, you'll see the link to StreamYard. If you want to call in, ask a question or just have your say, we want to hear from you. The best shows are when we have a lot of audience participation. So don't feel shy. Jump in and let's hear from you. So let's kick it off like I always do, and that's by letting you know how you can support us. And it's by heading to commandingthenarrative.com. If you hit the donate button at the top there, you'll come to this page. Now there's some options there on how you can contribute and support us, whether it be a direct route or through Buy Me a Coffee. People prefer each one, so both options are there for you. It helps to pay for the stream, it helps to pay for the website, and most importantly gives me a very warm and fuzzy feeling inside. And while you're there, head to the main page of Commanding the Narrative and you can keep up to date with all our podcasts, any articles that I might write. I was published in the Spectator in their latest issue, or not Spectator recently, and also the Light Australian newspaper in their recent issue. And if you want to know who's coming up on the podcast this week, head to commandingthenarrative.com and you'll find all that information there. Now, also, I'll let you know about a great initiative that I'm part of. I'm the president of Australians for Better Government. So please head there and sign up to be a member. The more people that we can get in this movement, the stronger that this movement will be. Go to the website, check out all the proposals that we're proposing. It's really about reforming our system of government and making it better, as the name suggests. And you'll see our recent event here, The Next Step, which was a discussion on Australia's political future with a host of great speakers, including the Honourable John Ruddick, also Darren DeBortley of DeBortley Wines, the Honourable Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Lockray, and Councillor Adam Zara and myself. It was a great event, and just announced we've got another one coming up on the Gold Coast. It will be on August 3rd. It's a Sunday at 12 p.m. Some more information will be coming out about this event, but if you're on the Gold Coast or close to it, please join us. We want to see you there. Tickets are up on sale now. You can head to Human Tickets. I think that's what it's called. I think I'll get that right as we go along. But it's called the Endless Horizons event, shaping the future of Australia's government. And Endless Horizons really shows the tremendous potential that Australia has. We have boundless potential in this country, and we are really being held back by bad government. And it's up to the people now. We can't rely on politicians anymore. The people need to drive change in this country, and that's what Australians for Better Government is all about. So please check out our website, and if you're on the Gold Coast or nearby, please check out that event. I'll be talking about it in the weeks to come. Also, Let's Rethink Renewables. You can sign up to be a member of that now. That's only just introduced. So please head to Let's Rethink Renewables. We'll be talking a little bit of energy policy tonight with our special guest. It's all about really rethinking the rollout of renewables in this country, and just realizing that renewables are not the great utopia that these politicians are painting. There are a lot of consequences that come along with the rollout of renewable energy. So please head to letsrethinkrenewables.org. And just lastly, to let you know, I touched on it briefly in just before, the Light Australia newspaper. It's got a new edition out now, issue number 18. So please head to thelightaustralia.com. You'll probably see the papers around everywhere as well. If you want to become a distributor, please head to thelightaustralia.com and sign up to be a distributor and get these papers out there. Right. Okay. On tonight's episode, I'm interested to speak to this gentleman. I've met him at a few events before. We've had him speak at some different events. He's always very impressive, and he just had a very impressive result in the recent federal election. He's the national director of the Family First Party. He was formerly the managing director of the Australian Christian Lobby. He was a vocal no advocate during the same-sex plebiscite, and he's also a former Toowoomba City councillor. Let's bring him on now. Mr. Lyle Shelton, welcome to Commanding the Narrative.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Great to be with you.
Great to have you. Now, this past election result, particularly in New South Wales in the Senate, where you were running as the lead Senate candidate for Family First. Now, you didn't get elected, but you came very, very close. You finished in 8th position. That's 2 behind Warwick Stacey, who was elected for One Nation. Now, you had a big result there, one that I don't think many people expected that result. And I actually was hosting a candidate forum in Warrawee, and I posed the question to you, why do we need parties like Family First? I was almost painting you as a micro party when we've already had the Libertarians and the Trumpet of Patriots and all these other minor parties on the right. And I asked you that question, and you answered it very well. But I guess I should kick off things tonight by apologizing, because you finished well ahead of the Libertarian Party in particular. In Victoria and Queensland, the Family First Party almost tripled the vote of the Libertarians in the Senate. And you finished ahead of the Trumpet of Patriots on preferences in New South Wales. It's time that people really start to take Family First seriously and treat it as an emerging party in Australia. Is that right?
Well, I hope so, Stephen. Look, we're working to a medium to long-term plan. We knew that it was going to be difficult for us to get people elected at this election, although you just never know. You've got to turn up and put your values on the ballot paper and put your candidates in the field. But our plan was to try and overcome the awareness problem that we have as a recently rebirthed political party, having been shut down for a number of years. And so this federal election was very much about raising the profile of the party, and I think we achieved that. And to perform creditably in a very crowded field of minor parties was very pleasing for us. Our real aim is to see if we can get seats in the state upper houses, and we've very much now pivoted to the South Australian election next March, and then I'll be running for the New South Wales upper house in early 2027. That's less than 20 months away. So we're really thrilled with where we've ended up as a result of the federal election. We've boosted the profile. We've built our supporter base, our donor base. We've got keen people that want to keep on the journey with us. And we're not taking our foot off the accelerator.
Yeah, that's good. It's good to see parties working hard and getting some momentum behind them. We've got this graph that you've sent through. This is the National Party First preferences, and you can see down the second bottom there is the Family First Party. Now, just ahead of you is the Trumpet of Patriots, and we all know Clive Palmer spent a lot of money and a lot of advertising, a lot of text messages to get his message out there. I'm sure you didn't have those resources behind you, but you've had a very similar result there. We've got a comment here from Mark in the chat. He says, good work on the policies in general as well, Lyle. What were some of the things that you think people gravitated to when they voted for Family First?
Yeah, well, just on the Clive Palmer Trumpet of Patriots thing, if I may, Stephen, just quickly, Clive, according to media reports, spent somewhere in the order of $60 million on his campaign. Now, we spent probably less than $1 million and got a very similar result. So I just think to us, that was very encouraging, because we are all about trying to build a sustainable political movement that's not just a fly-by-night, flash-in-the-pan thing. So we're very encouraged for that. I think the policies that attract people, look, I think people know deep down in their hearts that if you've got strong families, you'll have a strong nation. And we've walked away from tax policy that helps mums and dads to be able to raise kids in an affordable, effective way. We've redefined marriage so that we don't even know what a marriage is anymore. We don't even know what a woman is. Most politicians can't define that. So there's a lot of, just common sense social policies that we are looking to try and call the nation back to. Of course, the energy debate. We want families to be able to flourish economically. They can't when there's a cost of living crisis that's driven by government, energy folly, housing is unaffordable. We want young people to be able to afford a house so that they can, so it's attractive for them to get married and to have children and to raise the next generation. So these are the sort of things that we've been talking about. Religious freedom is the other big one. So we've been talking about these issues, and look, I think it's starting to get some resonance. We know we've got a long way to go, but we do believe we've got a policy proposition that's attractive to mainstream Australians.
I've got a comment here from John the Boy. He says Family First represents what the Liberals originally was. Now, I want to bring up some of the results. We'll compare some of the results. In the 2023 New South Wales state election, Family First polled 1.2%, which was just over 58,000 votes. At the federal election, you polled better. You got over 80,000 votes. So that's
in New South Wales. That's just in the state of New South Wales.
Yeah, that's just in New South Wales. So that's good progress there. But after preferences, you increased your vote to over 195,000, almost 196,000. That got you into that 8th position. So you've had a big increase through preferences, which is fantastic news. Do you think there's a lot of people out there, they're not ready to put the one next to Family First just yet, but they view your party favorably, across the political spectrum?
Yeah, look, I think that's obviously right. And look, we have to face it. Look, there are a number of parties that do hold some similarities and some values. I would say that Family First has some distinctives that are really important to us, which do set us apart from some of the other minor parties in this space. But I think, we are seen favourably, perhaps by One Nation voters and trumpet voters. The Liberal Party had us preference at number 3. So I'm sure we got I haven't done the analysis, but there would have been a strong flow from Liberal Party voters as well. In fact, anecdotally, I know I was at a function on Wednesday and 2 prominent Liberal Party members came up to me and they said quietly, "We voted for you." They vote for the Liberals number 2. I hear that all the time, and that goes to your viewers, comment. Are our policies what the Liberals should be? Yes, of course. I'm a student of Sir Robert Menzies. If you read his speeches, that's exactly what I believe in, and we're just prosecuting those sort of mainstream policies. So look, we're hugely encouraged, and that sort of result after preferences, certainly does put us in the frame for a New South Wales state upper house seat in March 2027, which, as I say, is only 20 months away. So, look, I don't want to count our chickens before they hatch, but this has always been our plan. We've been working we've known it's a multi-year process to work towards that 2027 election here in New South Wales. Next year in South Australia, where Deepa Matthew, who's a brilliant candidate, she'll be running there. Again, similar dynamics in South Australia. We think we can get her up, and possibly in Victoria get 1 or 2 candidates up at the end of next year. So this is what we've been building for, and we think there's potential for us, and there's an appetite for what we're standing for amongst mainstream voters.
Now you have a very, very Christian-based viewpoint in the party. It's really based on Christian values, and you got a lot of preferences from the Australian Christians Party as well. But something that really stood out to, well, actually, a friend of mine, Martin Jenkins, pointed this out to me, and it really surprised me. Actually, When you look at the preference flows from Australia's Voice, which is fundamentally a Muslim Islamic party, in a lot of ways, you picked up 30% of their preferences.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's news to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, in some ways that doesn't surprise me because, look, we've had some discussions with different Muslim groups over the last, 3 years that I've been involved in the rebirth of the party, and certainly they like, our family values. They share these values for family. Where there's a little bit of tension, a lot of tension, is because we've taken a strong stance on the Israel-Gaza war, and I think what Hamas did, they are the modern day Nazis, and it's bothered me enormously that many of our Muslim leaders in Australia and even the left in the academy and our universities seem to be supporting Hamas. But that's a diversion. But yeah, we're very, very pleased to have picked up those sort of votes. We make no apology for being a party that is based on Judeo-Christian values. We're a party for people of all faiths and none, but our core values, which we've enshrined as our reference as part of our party's constitution, is that we are here to advance the Judeo-Christian ethic. You don't have to be a Christian or be of any faith to be part of our party, but we are very clear that we think the values on which Australia was founded and which has underpinned the West, and which will provide the best opportunity for human flourishing for our people in the future, is to stick to those values. People don't have to subscribe to a religion, but those values are what have shaped the West. They are what have made Australia, and we think they're the values that are worth preserving if we want to have a flourishing future. And if Muslims want to subscribe to those values, they're more than welcome to, and we certainly welcome their championing of marriage and family values.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of crossovers because, family is important to all cultures and religions. I'm surprised that more parties out there aren't advocating strongly for families. It seems to be forgotten about these days.
It's only the modern secular left that has trashed the idea of mum and dad and said that, two blokes can, get a baby through commercial surrogates, they can purchase it and rent a womb, and all this, contorted trashing of ethics to create children and make them motherless or fatherless. It's only the seculars left that have this crazy utopian view. Hindus, Muslims, Christians, anyone with a brain knows that a child, wherever possible, should be given the opportunity to have the love of their mother and father. We all know that none of our families are perfect, but we should champion the gold standard, the ideal. And at the moment, our politicians can't even define a woman, let alone a family, let alone come up with some family-friendly tax policies that will help mums and dads get ahead.
We're smirking at that because it's so ridiculous, but it's terrible, man. This country's in a bad state, in my opinion. Families are struggling because of this ideology. What I want to do is I want to go through some of these policies more in detail and highlight some of the areas that you guys are really doing some good work or may have some good ideas. But first, before we get to that, I've got a question here from Mark. Mark says, Lyle, would you be open to super reform where people can use their super against their mortgage as an offset via an owner-occupied, self-managed super strategy to assist in home ownership?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Look, I have to be careful. I don't want to make unilateral, policy announcements on behalf of the party on your podcast, Stephen. But look, I'll give a personal view. Look, I certainly would be open to that, and I think that's something we, as a party, should discuss. My daughter lives in New Zealand. She's married to a young builder who's just finished his carpentry apprenticeship. In New Zealand, they are allowed to access their super for a home deposit, and that's what my daughter and her husband are looking to do. So, look, we have a housing affordability crisis in this nation. It's not like it was when my parents were young with their small children in the 1970s. On one wage, my parents, who were on a very average wage, two other families in our street who are motor mechanics, again, not highly rich people, but one wage, kids, they could go to the bank and borrow enough money to build a 4-bedroom house on the outskirts of Toowoomba, Queensland in the early 1970s. Who could do that now? You just can't. So something's gone wrong. And so we have to look at ways, whether it's access to our super, obviously increasing supply, cutting red tape, releasing more land. These things have got to be looked at urgently so that our young people are not locked out of the Australian dream. And I'm very concerned that there's growing resentment. I see it in my own kids. They feel resentful that they can't buy into what we were able to, and what certainly their grandparents were able to.
You mentioned, what people could afford in previous generations. One income being able to support the whole family, buy a house, buy a car, and keep everything rolling on while the mother stays at home and looks after the kids. We can't do that in the current circumstances. That never gets explained why. But really, what it comes down to is bad government and bad policy by governments, and we're really paying the cost for that. Families are paying the cost for that. Now, one of the things that the Labor Party is really going to be emboldened by after the last federal election result, the recent federal election result, is energy policy and the mad rush to net zero. People like Chris Bowen who are going to be rubbing his hands together going, look at that vote. We have a mandate to continue with this policy now. It's really going to impact in a big way on Australia. Not only is it damaging our economy, but it's also damaging our environment with this rollout of renewable energy. But there's no real handbrake on the Labor government anymore, because they just achieved this big result. And they're going to be pushing ahead with this. What are your thoughts on this rollout of net zero and the current energy policy?
I think it's the biggest self-inflicted wound that our country has ever perpetrated on itself. And the political class, both sides of politics, have done it. Remember, it was the coalition who sent Scott Morrison to Glasgow. Barnaby Joyce in his National Party room voted to do that. I think that was one of the biggest mistakes ever made by the so-called opposition. And Labor now feels they feel very smug about this, because they've sort of won the net zero debate in their minds. Again, because there was no opposition, there was no sustained political argument against it. And to hear Anthony Albanese at the National Press Club last week saying, Australians have rejected, US-style divisive politics, blah, 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 and that, they've endorsed our energy transition, it's rubbish. They just haven't heard the alternative. And Australians, apart from our housing crisis that we've just touched on, we've got this cost of living crisis. And if anyone's looked at, John Anderson, former Deputy Prime Minister, and Chris Uhlmann's excellent podcast last week, our politicians are lying to us about energy. And this is what is driving the cost of living crisis, causing our electricity bills to go through the roof. And all the market analysts, the Australian Energy Market Operator, are all predicting even higher prices, up to 9% higher. It's just insane what we are doing to the nation. But Albo and Chris Bowen are feeling smug. And the reason they've gotten away with it is because the Liberal Party can't work out or can't summon the courage to do what I know many of them know to be true. They know that net zero is a dog of a policy. They know that it's hurting people, but they don't have the courage to stand against it because they're worried that they'll be labelled climate deniers. They're scared of the media, and they don't have the courage to sustain a debate. And while ever there's no opposition and no alternative policy being put, people are like lambs being led to the slaughter. And people just voted for the devil they knew because there was an absence of an alternative debate. And I lay the blame at the feet of the Liberals and the Nationals for that.
No, you're exactly right. But look, the cost of energy just isn't reflected on your electricity bill. It goes into everything. Retail shops having to put up their prices because they can't keep the lights on without passing on the costs. Manufacturing, I mean, it's across the board. Everything goes up when electricity becomes more expensive.
Well, Stephen, Labor have been very clever with this. They've masked the cost on our electricity bills by subsidising it. So they've created an electricity price crisis, and then they've given energy bill relief in terms of government subsidies. And a number of the state Labor governments did the same. The Queensland Labor government were giving massive rebates off energy bills. I think the Victorian government was. And remember, these governments are up to their eyeballs in debt. The federal government is up to $1 trillion in debt we're going to hit this year, and yet they're shoveling money out the door to pay for the crisis that they have created. Now, when these subsidies come off and people realise the real cost of electricity, it's going to be an almighty shock. And this is when I think people will start to work out Albanese, and they'll start to work out that they've been lied to by the Liberals and the Nationals, who have not been serving them well. And I think we're heading for a big crisis. And Albanese's popularity, I predict, is going to unravel very, very quickly, because his policies are unsustainable. They're going to hurt, they're going to bite, and it's going to be within the next 3 years. And I think there's a real opportunity for the coalition if they can grasp it. But, at the moment, they can't even work out what a woman is, let alone whether net zero is good or bad.
I know, it's terrible. And look, I think people are going to start looking for other alternatives to both Labor and Liberal. People might start looking to family first. What are some of the solutions that your party proposes when it comes to energy policy?
Well, we've simply got to have coal and gas in the system. We can't keep closing down coal-fired power stations. We have, well over 1,000 years of coal reserve. You know this better than anyone, Stephen, through your work through the Rational Renewable Energy Forum. We've got so much gas, particularly in Victoria. I was speaking with a mining industry executive the other day. He said there's so much gas in Victoria, you could give it away. I mean, we should be an energy superpower in this country, yet we've got the highest electricity costs, almost the highest in the OECD, having had the lowest in the OECD. So we've got to get coal and gas. If we're concerned about emissions, well, obviously the only way to have zero emissions electricity and baseload power, and to enjoy having the lights on and the lifestyle to which we've all become accustomed and which we should enjoy, and that is to go to nuclear. So I think there needs to be a coal to gas to nuclear transition over time, and we need to stop rolling out these windmills and solar panels, bulldozing hilltops at great environmental damage, and of course the cost, which is in the trillions, of rewiring the nation to get electricity poles and wires to dispersed locations, 28,000 kilometres worth of it. I mean, you know this better than me, and your viewers, I'm sure, are aware of this. But these are crazy policies; they make no sense at all. And Albo made a big deal about the coalition's $600 billion cost of nuclear energy. Well, and that was obviously a fake figure, but it's not fake to say that it's going to cost more than $1 trillion to rewire and transition the nation to windmills and solar panels, which don't even work when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing. So Family First wants to get away from this nonsense as quickly as possible so that we can start to bring the costs of electricity down. And as you said earlier, that then brings the cost of everything down, because everything has energy, transport, our food, our building materials, the whole economy relies on energy, and we're crueling the economy for no good reason.
And everyday Australians are the ones that are being squeezed by all of this. We just talked about electricity prices, but another thing we can talk about is taxation. Now, one of the things that you advocated for during the federal election was income splitting, which I think is a great policy. I'm happy to hear that the Liberals are now starting to consider that policy as well. It really needs to happen. I mean, it's just common sense to me to do that. I mean, if you want to have families go back to, the mum staying at home to raise the kids, and I say the mum because it is important that the mum stays home, especially when they're under 2. I think it's incredibly important that the mum's there. I mean, anyone that has kids will just know that from the experience of having kids, that little kids want their mum around. So do you want to explain that for people when it comes to income splitting? For me, it's just a no-brainer.
It's an absolute no-brainer. And look, it's a policy that's been around for a long time. John Howard used to promote it, although he didn't quite go there. They worked out family tax A and family tax B, which resulted in taking money off us and giving it back. Very inefficient. You have the churn through the bureaucracy. But a cleaner way is to simply allow a couple where one member of the family unit is staying at home looking after the child. Usually the mother, doesn't have to be. I don't want to prescribe that, but like you, I agree that it's optimal that it's the mother, because the social science shows that children from 0 to 3 have a like a biological, sociological need for attachment to their mother. That is crucial to a child's development in those 0 to 3 years, particularly. Look,
as I said, if you have parents yourself, you just know it. Like, when I'm dealing with my 3-year-old daughter, it's completely different to dealing with my 1-year-old son. My 1-year-old son, yes, he plays with me every now and again, but when it comes down to it, when he's hungry or when he needs to be fed or when he needs to be put to sleep, he wants his mum. And it was the same with my daughter when she was that age as well. But as she's gotten older, she becoming more of a daddy's girl. It's just the way things play out. Everyone says the same thing, and that's why it's so important in my view.
Well, the social science says it as well, and look again. I've mentioned John Anderson, but he's been one of the founders of the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, which I think is doing amazing policy work. Their conference in Sydney last October showcased people like Virginia Tapscott and others who are expert in early childhood development. We've been again lied to as a result of feminist ideology. A lot of our tax policy has been driven by feminist ideology, and again, Liberal and Labor, Labor particularly drives it. Liberal don't have the courage to stand against it. So, I know of female Liberal parliamentarians in our current parliament who think it's misogynistic to have the sort of conversation that you and I are having now, to suggest that it might be optimal for a mother to be at home with their babies. Now, again, as I said, I don't want to prescribe that. I think parents should have the choice. But I know that if most women had the choice to stay at home, they would want to do that. But tax policy, ideology mitigates against that. And everything that Labor and Liberal do is to drive women back into the workforce and to put kids into childcare, give parents the choice. Income splitting gives them a greater choice because it allows the couple to be taxed through one tax bracket instead of two. That essentially halves their taxable income, and it gives them a leg up as they're trying to raise kids in those early formative years. There's plenty of time. I'm obviously not against women working, but I know that most mums that I know, and certainly my wife, was absolutely determined when our kids were little. She wanted to stay at home until they went to school. And when they all went to school, she went straight back into the workforce because she likes being in the workforce. Yeah. I think most women would want that choice. At the moment, they don't have that choice. My daughter, who lives in New Zealand, doesn't have that choice. She's got 2 small children. She has to go and work simply to make ends meet. That is not freedom. It's tyrannical. And the tax system needs to be rearranged to be family friendly. And at the moment, couples with children are penalised by couples who have one partner staying at home are penalised by the tax system. They get less childcare subsidies. Again, that money should go to the family unit for them to use that how they want, whether it's a grandparent looking after the child, whether it's one of the parents looking after the child, or however they want to use it, rather than it having to go to an outsourced industrial childcare centre to raise their children. So again, this is common sense stuff, but ideology has captivated our politics. And again, the Liberals and the Nationals do not have the courage to stand up against this radical feminist ideology, which calls you a misogynist simply for having this sort of conversation.
And you hit the nail on the head. We're not that policy, income splitting, is not forcing mothers to stay at home with their children. It's giving them the choice. If they choose to, maybe the father wants to stay home. Who knows? It gives couples the choice to make that decision themselves. I don't understand the pushback against it. I mean, some people might say that it costs the economy. I know some parties out there ran some figures and said it actually doesn't cost that much at all. So you would think that the Labor Party would jump on this policy. They're supposedly for families, as they say, but just doesn't seem to happen.
The Labor Party, they're very much driven by, and have been for many decades, driven by the left of the party, which has a strong feminist ideology, and of course the Greens, which are the tail that wag the dog. But Stephen, I know many Liberals have. I was talking to a Liberal parliamentarian the other day who supports income splitting, as I do. And he recounted to me how this was once raised in the last term of Parliament in the party room, and female Liberal members stormed out saying this was misogynist. Now this is what you're up against in the Liberal Party. This is why parties like Family First and others exist, because the Liberals have abandoned the Menzian values, which prioritised home and hearth, as Menzies would have used that terminology. But the Liberals are a million miles from that these days.
It blows my mind. But look, all this stuff is incredibly important for people wanting to raise families. The other part of it all is housing as well. So we've gone through energy policy, taxation. Now we're on to housing, and housing affordability is out of control. I mean, a lot of families now have to live in a small unit, let alone even thinking about buying a house. A lot of them are renting. They can't even afford the unit. Do you have any policies that would help with when it comes to housing affordability? Is there anything there we can address?
Look, I think, the obvious one is we've got to release more land. It's the reason housing prices are so high is because there's a suppliers constrained. That's driven by, obviously, immigration that's out of control. So we need to obviously pull back our immigration. We're not anti-immigration as a party, but clearly if your housing stock isn't keeping up, if your infrastructure is not keeping up, you've got to look at those numbers. And I think, it is way out of control. So you've got to look at that. Australia is the most depopulated continent on the planet apart from Antarctica. The idea that we have a land shortage, which we have, is just ridiculous. The continental United States is a similar landmass to Australia. It's got 300 million people or whatever. There's still plenty of open space. If you've ever been to America, as I have many times, there's lots of open space, plenty of trees. We've got lots of room for more houses and suburbs. We just have a lack of will, and a lot of our land is not particularly arable. Let's put houses on it, and yes, we would need to create infrastructure and transport and all that sort of stuff. Our regions have a huge amount of potential. I grew up in regional Queensland, a place called Toowoomba. These places are really attractive places for people to live. I think we have a lack of creative policy will. So we've got to release more land, reduce immigration. We've got to cut red tape. My brother is a builder, again, back in my hometown of Toowoomba. I live in Sydney these days. But, what he tells me about the climate initiatives that he has to double glazing on, normal homes in Queensland because of climate change. All of this crazy stuff, which is just adding to the costs of building. Let people have cheap and simple houses and release more land so that we can do it. But again, I just don't see the will and the courage in our current political class.
Yeah, I got a comment here from John the Boy, and John's only in his early 20s. He says, frankly, I don't see how I'll be able to afford a house one day. It's just too expensive.
Look, this grieves me. And again, I've got children in their early to mid 20s, and they feel the same. They're good kids. I'm not sort of super rich, and we can't bankroll them into a house as much as I would love to. But they can't do. When I was their age, my wife and I were paying off our first house, and we could do that. Now we needed two incomes to do that in the mid 90s. My parents in the 70s could do it on one income, and they could do it with a better house than what my wife and I had. Now, fast forward, and my daughter and her husband in New Zealand are struggling to buy a house on two incomes. We have gone backwards as a society, and I think we've got to urgently look at restructuring our economy. This is why I'm not a libertarian. I'm not a laissez-faire economic rationalist. And two of my board members, federal executive members, are former Labor members of the South Australian Parliament. So we're not opposed to government intervention. And I look at the Harvester judgment by Justice Higgins, the famous industrial relations benchmark that was set, where he said the average wage should be set so that a family man, and forgive them, the patriarchal language, but that's how they spoke in the days, that a man should be able to raise a family on one wage, with reasonable leave, holidays, a weekend. We had the whole 8 hours work, 8 hours play, 8 hours rest thing. That was very much an Australian thing. We had the Harvester judgment from Justice Higgins, which set out the basic wage, which should allow a family to exist in basic comfort on one wage. Now, I think we've got to revisit that again in Australian society and economic policy and say, okay, what does it take for a family to exist on one wage and to have a house and to have the Australian dream? And let's recalibrate the economy to make that work. Otherwise, our young people are just becoming slaves to the economy. And that puts enormous pressure on a young couple when they're trying to raise a family. The most important thing that a young couple can do is raise the next generation. And the last thing you want is massive financial pressure. We all don't mind sacrificing and, working hard to get ahead when you're young, but you've got to be able to see an opportunity. And at the moment, our young people have lost hope because it just seems out of reach for them.
And look, the solutions are out there. They're just getting ignored. I spoke to John Alexander a few weeks ago, and he was advocating for high-speed rail and talking about his journey there, advocating for it. I don't know how you feel about high-speed rail, but he was talking about little towns and regional centres like Toowoomba or Goulburn and areas like that where we could have a high-speed rail, and it would be like half an hour into Sydney. People could live there, not have to live in the rat race. They can live in a nice regional town and be close enough to be able to get to work every day. And that would decentralize our cities. It would make housing more affordable. I mean, these solutions are there. He talked about value capture as a way of funding it. People have looked into that. There's been parliamentary inquiries. There's been a lot of work done. It just doesn't go anywhere. It just gets ignored all the time.
Yeah, again, what's our vision for our nation? Look, I've had the privilege of traveling to places like Japan and South Korea. I mean, the Shinkansen in Japan is unbelievable, 300 kilometers an hour. I mean, I traveled from Tokyo to Hiroshima and back in a day, and it was an easy day trip. That's the equivalent of Brisbane to Sydney and back in a day. And we had a day being tourists in Hiroshima. Similarly, in South Korea, the KTX there, I went from Seoul to Busan, right in the south. We've got big cities like Sydney and Melbourne. We've got a flat landmass. So from an engineering point of view, this is doable. And as you say, if you could, connect up, Sydney and Melbourne, particularly with high-speed rail, you could create those regional hubs like Goulburn, Canberra, other places, and you could decentralize things. But, and again, that's the sort of money that would be a worthwhile spend of taxpayers' money, because it's infrastructure, it's snowy hydro type nation building work. But that's the sort of vision that we should have for our nation. But again, it just doesn't exist.
And you mentioned America and all the cities. I remember driving from New York to Washington, D.C., and you're basically just going from one city to the next, to Baltimore, Philadelphia. They're all almost connected in a lot of ways. I mean, to think that here in Australia, we just have Sydney and Melbourne, and then a few little smaller cities like Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide. It's just nuts. There's been no long-term vision in this country for a long time, and we've been really struggling with it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And again, yes, that they're highly urbanized areas, that corridor between Washington, D.C. and New York. And I've driven that myself, and I've been on Amtrak through there as well. But, you don't have to get very far off the main drag, and you're through Pennsylvania. The countryside there is beautiful. It's like the Darling Downs in Queensland, where I come from, that sort of, soil. So again, there's plenty of resource in terms of available land for us to do things in this country, again, if we have the will and the nation building vision for it. But again, it just feels like our political class seek power for the sake of power, and they're more managerial. They're currently managing our decline rather than having a vision for our prosperity. And I think that's the problem with our current crop of politicians.
I want to shift to probably some more contentious issues now when it comes to the indoctrination of our kids and also attacks on Christians. I mean, for me, I'm agnostic. I can't claim to be Christian. I did go to a Catholic school growing up, but I wasn't Catholic. But I just, from an outsider looking at the playing field, I see this real push from the LGBTQ community, claiming that they want inclusivity, they want fairness, they want equality, they want all these things, but they also want to impose their will, it seems, on Christians. Now we're seeing that with this legislation recently, where they were trying to say that Christian doctors would need to perform abortions. So they couldn't have what do you call it? Where it comes to conscientious objections to it. Also, Christian schools are being forced to hire non-Christian teachers. We're seeing a lot of this in all different areas. You're one of the vanguard in pushing back against all of this. Where is this coming from, and how do Christians push back against some of this? Because basically, from how it appears to me, these activist groups are saying to Christians, well, you don't get the right anymore to believe in what you believe and how you want to live.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, they've been very clever over many years in saying, well, we just want equality, we want, tolerance, love is love, all these, wonderful sort of slogans, which, motherhood things, well, who could object to them? And on face value, I don't really object to them. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with their lifestyle or what they're sort of promoting, but if they want to live that way, that's fine. And before same-sex marriage came in, And again, I was involved in supporting these changes, but 84 laws were amended at federal level under, in Kevin Rudd's early tenure as Prime Minister, to take away all discrimination against same-sex couples. It was all removed. And yet they came back and said, no, we want same-sex marriage. And, as you said, now they're imposing that if you disagree with the idea of same-sex marriage, you're called a bigot, you're a hater. If you're someone like me who has been publicly critical of drag queens reading to little children in libraries and indoctrinating them into harmful gender fluid ideology and LGBTQI plus sexual expressionism, I just think, gender fluid ideology and anything to do with sex should be nowhere near a 2 to 8 year old. But that's what Drag Queen Storytime wants for little children. And if you don't believe me, have a look at the transcripts from the court case that I've been involved in over the last 5 years, because they're suing me for saying that this shouldn't be, for criticizing this. And I'm not the only one. So they want the rest of society to conform to their view of the world. It's completely intolerant. It's not love is love. It's actually, you will conform to our view of the world or else. And they've weaponized anti-discrimination law. They've weaponized vilification laws against people like me and Kirley Smith, Sal Grover. And we're talking people who aren't even necessarily Christians, just, ordinary feminists who are saying, well, women should have safe spaces, as Sal Grover said. We should have a smartphone application that's women only. And yet she's going all the way to the High Court. Kirley Smith had the police turn up on a door because she said blokes shouldn't be playing soccer against women. I've been in court for, almost 6 years because of the drag queens. This is not the Australia I grew up in. And the LGBTIQA plus political lobby has been very clever, very powerful, but I think most mainstream Australians, if they knew what was going on, would certainly not support this. But of course, there's a media class and there's, again, a cowardly political class on both sides of politics who will not stand up to the Rainbow Brigade. And hence, we've lost our freedoms in Australia. We're not a free country anymore.
See, I mean, it puts people in an incredibly uncomfortable position. Like myself, I'm definitely not I'm not Christian. I'm not, I don't know, identify as LGBTQ or whatever the current alphabet is. I'm just sitting on the sideline watching all of this. And I think in a lot of ways in life, everything comes down to balance, and you need a balance between these different groups. I mean, obviously they don't agree. They have different viewpoints and ideologies, and that's what life is, and that's what living in a society is. But it just seems that on the LGBT side of things, they're now legislating against Christians. You gave me the example of yourself with the drag queen case that's still ongoing. I understand that you won that case and now they're appealing it and still dragging you through lawfare. I mean, there's legislation in the New South Wales Parliament that bans conversion therapy, and there's full-term abortion legislation and different things. It just goes on and on and on. Where is that balance? We seem to be going from one side of things way over to the other side now. The pendulum swinging way too far. It needs to be brought back, where we say, if Christians want to have Christian schools where they just have Christian teachers, I don't understand why that's not acceptable. I'm sure they're not saying that to Muslim schools or Hindu schools or other schools. There seems to be this attack on Christians. I don't know why. But we need to get back to a balance, don't you think?
I couldn't agree more. And look, as I said earlier, I mightn't agree with some of these particular worldviews or approaches to life, but I believe in tolerance. And but just don't force us to, don't force a Christian or a Muslim school to have a transgender teacher, to have someone who promotes an ideology of gender fluidness to children, if that's not what the parent community want. Why should you be forced to have that? Why should a Christian school be forced to allow Johnny to go to the school formal in a dress as Sally? They should be allowed to say, look, we have some standards, and and obviously be compassionate to anyone who might be struggling genuinely with complex issues. But at the end of the day, people should be free to have their values. It's called freedom of association. It's one of the great freedoms that have always underpinned the West, along with freedom of speech and freedom of religion, property rights. But we don't have freedom of association anymore, or at least it's under attack. And the Albanese government has come very close to stripping that freedom off Christian schools. The New South Wales Parliament came very close to forcing, Catholic hospitals to perform abortions. That got taken out of the legislation at the last minute just a few weeks ago. But not until people had to protest in the streets about it. There's a very aggressive, radical element in our politics on the left of Labor. It's on the left of the Liberal Party, and of course the Greens are the tail that wags the dog that push all this sort of stuff. But again, it's swamping mainstream people, and sadly Christians and Muslims are the canaries in the coal mine when it comes to these basic freedom debates. And we've got to start being vigilant about it now, because we're not living in the tolerant Australia that I grew up in anymore.
I want to talk to you a little bit about your case. Obviously, we can't go into specifics because it's ongoing, but you won that case and then they appealed it, so you're still getting dragged through the courts. Yep. Do you think it's going to end? I mean, this lawfare, we've seen it with Trump overseas. I mean, it's definitely happening. Do you think it's just an attack on you that's not going to let up? I mean, do they just keep appealing and appealing, or is there an end in sight?
I sadly think there's no end in sight. My lawyer said to me as we walked out of the final day of the appeal in March this year, and the judge, Justice Nicholas Lewis, is currently writing his judgment, having heard 3 days of appeal hearings in March. But my lawyer thinks we think we'll win again. We won the first time. We think we'll win again because we think we've got a strong case legally. But we think they'll continue to appeal. And the reason I think my lawyer is right in that, I sat in the court, listened very carefully to their arguments, to the expert witnesses that they called. They see my case as a seminal case in terms of the global approach to how the LGBTQI plus political movement indoctrinates children. They see drag queen story time as key to their ability to induct children into queer and camp ideas. And queer and camp were the words that were used by the expert witness from La Trobe University who testified at my who gave evidence against me in the appeal. I just forgotten the particular academic's name. I've got it in my papers here. And that really struck me. These people are fighting very hard, because if people like me who criticize their ability to propagate this gender fluid ideology on 2-year-olds, I'm an impediment to their agenda, essentially to recruit children to their agenda. And so they're fighting very hard to keep that space open. And there's been virtually no media coverage of my case. I think it's a really important freedom of speech case in this nation. But if they win and they can shut down people like me, then no one can criticize their agenda for children. So that's why I think they're going to fight all the way. I think it's going to drag on for years. I think we will, like Sal Grover, end up in the High Court at some stage. Already this has cost over $500,000. I'm so grateful to people who have crowdfunded my legal defense, so grateful to my lawyers at the Human Rights Law Alliance and their donors. But I just think this is going to keep going, probably for many, many years to come. And unless some politicians stand up and say, we're going to amend our flawed regime of anti-discrimination and anti-vilification laws and stop this nonsense. But again, there's no politicians who have the courage to say, well, we actually believe in free speech in Australia, and whether people agree with Lyle or not, we're going to have free speech. But again, I just have rising contempt for our politicians, because they know my case is going on. They know Sal Grover is going through what she's going through. They know about Kirralie Smith. They could fix this. It's a political issue. But politicians, they go to Anzac Day, they claim to venerate, our Anzac dead who fought for our freedoms. And yet some of us are being dragged through court for the freedoms that our Anzacs fought for. And no one in our parliament is doing anything to ensure that we live up to what the Anzacs bequeathed us. And so I am contemptuous of our current political class, because they are gutless and they're not worthy of the Anzac legacy, and they're not worthy of what it means to be Australian. I'm sorry that sounds a bit strange, a bit strong, but I tell you what, this is nonsense what I'm going through and what so many others are going through.
Look, mate, you must have a lot of courage and tenacity to keep fighting this. I mean, a lot of people get scared off, and I guess that's the whole point of the lawfare, or at least one aspect of it. And whether people agree with you or not, I think people would look at it and say, look, I mean, no one should be dragged through the courts like you have been. I mean, 6 years, is that right, that you've been in
We're into
the
our
court?
6th year, our 6th year of litigation.
I mean, you said that the media are not looking at it. You're probably not getting enough attention on it as it deserves. You seem to be just there by yourself fighting this. I mean, what has that done to you personally? I mean, obviously, as I said, you must have a lot of courage and tenacity to keep going, but there would be a real burden on you with all of this going on.
Look, there is, and I think I've expressed that burden in terms of just the grief I feel that this can happen to Australians. And look, I'm not the only one. I've named a couple other names, but there's many other people who are going through this. I suppose that burden has it's been helped. I've been helped in the carrying of that by so many, thousands of people literally who have supported my case, through the crowdfunding. And again, I haven't had big donors. It's been mums and dads who have chipped in small amounts that have added up to a lot, that have allowed me and taken the financial pressure off my wife and I to be able to continue fighting this case. So I'm incredibly grateful. That's why I've been able to do it. So I feel very humbled by the support of so many ordinary people who know this is nonsense. I'll mention one other thing, Stephen. The barrister for the other side is a man named Greg Barnes, KC. You might have heard of Greg Barnes. Maybe some of your listeners. He's probably Australia's most prominent left-wing lawyer. He's a King's. Well, he's not a KC. Sorry, he's a special counsel because he's a Republican, so he uses the SC terminology. But he spent 3 days in my original trial, and he spent a couple of days at the appeal hearings arguing why I shouldn't have free speech. Now, Greg Barnes is the man who got Julian Assange out of prison in the UK and brought him back to Australia. That was Greg Barnes. Now Greg's a good bloke. I like Greg. We chat sort of on the edges of the court hearings. And after the sort of day of him in court in March this year, trashing my freedom of speech all day, I couldn't contain myself. I went up to Greg at the end of the day. I said, Greg, you've just spent all day trashing my right to freedom of speech, yet you went to extraordinary lengths for Julian Assange's freedom of speech. I said, if I go to jail, now that's I'm being hyperbolic. I don't think I'll go to jail, but I could get fined very seriously. And if I don't pay the fine, I could go to jail, and I'm not going to pay a fine. But, if I end up losing this, I said, Greg, are you going to help, fight for my freedom of speech? Now he can't answer that question. And just the hypocrisy and the irony of the left in Australia, that they would fight for Julian Assange's freedom of speech, and yet they'll go to court and spend days and days trying to crush my freedom of speech. It's just extraordinary. And again, the fact that no one in politics or the media picks up on these basic, obvious points is very frustrating.
In this whole process, what have you learned?
Well, I've learned that Australia is not a free country, and that the platitudes of politicians about us being a free and open society are not worth a hill of beans. And I've also learned if we want to keep freedom open, and look, I think this is very serious. I think most mainstream Australians would be with me. They don't want little children being taught that it's okay to change their gender, which is what drag queen story time is all about. It's a dangerous, harmful thing. Even the UK have closed down their child gender clinics. Australia hasn't yet. But drag queen story time is the gateway to indoctrinating little kids into gender fluid ideology and to LGBTIQA plus sexual expressionism. Sex and toddlers should not go together. Sexualized personas like drag queens should not be put in front of little children. And I suppose what I've learned through this, if we want to protect children in this country, it comes at a high price. So, yeah, I'm not backing down.
Yeah, see, that's what I don't understand. I mean, we see this in schools, we see it in childcare centres, we see it in preschools, all this rainbow stuff everywhere. I mean, it's what it really is talking about is the sexual density, I mean, basically who a person is sleeping with. I mean, why is this going anywhere near kids? I mean, it's something they don't need to be thinking about. I just don't understand why it's in the schools.
Well, Stephen, look, it's why myself and others fought against same-sex marriage back in the plebiscite in 2017 and in the 10 years leading up to that, because again, you've got to know, your political adversaries and what their real agenda is. And look, they cloaked everything in love is love, and it's just about two people, no consequences, blah, blah, blah. It was always about how to get to children and how to indoctrinate them into an alternative worldview, which is totally antithetical to what most mums and dads want for their kids. Most mums and dads want their kids to be protected from sexualized personas. They want them to understand that boys are boys and girls are girls. Most mums and dads want their kids to grow up and to get married and to have their own kids and to, continue the propagation of our wonderful society. But these alternative sexualities and worldviews, they take kids down a totally different path. And this is all about, trying to recruit the next generation. So, look, these are not harmless agendas, but again, the media, the political class, the corporates, the whole woke project has taken us down a terrible rabbit hole. And I think people are now starting to wake up to it. But it's happened because of a lack of courage amongst politicians. I know many politicians who know this is wrong, but they don't have the courage to speak about it.
Well, obviously, you've got the courage to speak about these things, mate. I mean, you've proved that, and you're leading this family first movement or party. For people out there who might not be Christians, who might not be religious, I mean, why should they look towards Family First as someone that they should support at upcoming elections?
Yeah, look, as I said earlier, we are not a Christian party. We are unashamedly promoting the Judeo-Christian ethic, and there's many people who are not Christians who think that is a good ethic. And anyone who knows their history knows that ethic has been the foundation of the West. So I would hope that, obviously I'd hope that Christian people would support us, but I know that there's not enough votes amongst that constituency. But I also know that for Australia, to flourish and to go forward, we need to rediscover some of these timeless values. And I just believe that, mainstream common sense people resonate with the sort of things that you and I are discussing tonight. There'll always be some people who are hostile and who have a different worldview. That's fine. Let's have a contest of ideas. Let's have a debate. That's what politics is supposed to be. But we don't have a debate at the moment because the Liberal Party have rolled over on most of this agenda. So I just think if we can, have the sort of conversations we're having tonight, I think if most people in Western Sydney, whether they're Christians or not, heard what you and I have just discussed tonight, I think there'd be enormous resonance. But we've got to get through the media gatekeepers. Podcasts like this are fantastic before, creating a platform, hopefully sowing some seeds. But I just know that, mainstream people, whether they're religious or not, understand enough about how the way the world works, how the human body is structured, what family dynamics are necessary for the flourishing of children. This is just common sense stuff if we want to have a society and a future nation that is functional in the long term. So I just think it's common sense, and I hope people are attracted to Family First because it's common sense more than anything else.
And people that watch this podcast will know that I'm not currently in a political party. I don't support any particular party, but I do like having people on that have conviction and stand up for their beliefs, whether I agree with them or not. Most of the time I do agree with them because I do like people that really stand up for what they're what they feel and what they're putting towards the Australian people. I mean, I think that's just transparent and open, and it's real leadership. I mean, we're really lacking leadership in this country at the moment, and it's all due to politicians getting up there and lying through their teeth, or not basically presenting the true argument or their true beliefs. So if people have watched this and they're interested in Lyle and they're interested in Family First, you can head to the website familyfirstparty.org.au, and you can sign up to be a volunteer or a member, or you can donate as well if you wish. Lyle's also got his own website, lyleshelton.com.au. He's also on X at Lyle Shelton and other social media platforms. So check him out, follow him if you're not already. Keep up to date with everything that they're doing. And you're having a national conference come up soon. Is that right? You want to just plug that quickly?
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it, Stephen. Yes, we do. We've got our national conference coming up on the 5th and 6th of September of this year at the Epping Club here in Sydney. And we've got some terrific speakers, including Jared Holland from the Page Research Centre talking about energy, Dr. Ian Plimer, Dr. Bella Debrera from the Institute of Public Affairs talking about education policy, and many others. So, I'd encourage people to go. If you go to our website and click on Get Involved, you'll see events there, and you'll see some information about the conference.
Okay, mate, I want us to squeeze in a couple of more questions. This one's from Mark. Lyle, are you open to work with other minor parties on key issues which affect South Australians for next year's election, such as the declared climate emergency and push to net zero 2027?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we are in discussions with other minor parties all the time. Clearly, as I said earlier, there are some overlapping values, and we need to cooperate. So yes, the answer to that question is absolutely yes, and we do have those discussions and talks, and particularly, we want to make sure that when we get to election time, that preferences on our side of the centre right minor party space, that we are tight in our preferencing, so that we ensure that someone who shares a commonality of values has the best chance.
And when you came to one of our events in Guildford, I think it was last year, you mentioned that John Howard actually wrote about you in his book, saying that why doesn't the Liberal Party open its doors for people like Lyle? It seems at the moment the Liberal Party really needs to reform, or at least have a good hard look at itself. I mean, I was expelled from the Liberal Party. There's a lot of people sitting on the sidelines that have either left the Liberal Party or have been expelled as well. Do you have any view? I know you're not in the Liberal Party, but do you have any views on where that party needs to go?
Yeah, look, I think it's got to adopt an agenda like family. It's got to go back to its Menzian roots again. I was in Australian Christian Lobby, which is a lobby group. It's an advocacy group, not a political party. I was involved in that for 10 years as a lobbyist in Canberra. That's a really important work. But after 10 years, I wanted to get back into the political scene. So I joined Cory Bernardi's fledgling Australian Conservatives at the time. And after the 2019 election, Cory decided to shut it down. And that was disappointing. So that left me sort of homeless. So I thought, okay, I've got a passion for politics. Let's go back to the Liberal Party. I mean, people like Matt Canavan rang me up straight after the 2019 election, said, look, come back to the Nationals, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, yeah, okay, I'll do that. So I spent 18 months trying to gain re-entry into the LNP. I was living back in Queensland at the time. They wouldn't have me. And I know, look, I had enough insider contact to know that they didn't want me because of the things that I've talked about tonight on your podcast. So my membership was blocked. John Howard became aware of me trying to gain re-entry into the party. And in his book, A Sense of Balance, which was released a couple of years ago, he mentions the fact that people like me, and he mentions me by name, were denied membership of the Liberals, and he bemoans that, says this is wrong, that people of the values that I hold should be denied entry to the party. But look, that they wouldn't have me. They expelled you. I know many other good people, conservatives. My friend John Ruddick, who's also speaking at our conference, have tried to get the Liberal Party back to these common sense policies, which Robert Menzies was all about. But have either been expelled or blocked like myself. So it's a sorry state of affairs. Now, I know many people who are working within the Liberal Party that have managed to get through the gate. And I think it's a both-and strategy. I think you need your family first, your One Nations and others putting pressure from the outside. But I admire the people that have managed to, stay in the party and are working from within, because they will hopefully be a party of government. And so you need good people there. But it's going to take the outside pressure from the minor parties like us to reform them. And I think it's probably not a short-term fix.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Speaking of the minor parties, John the Boy has a question. Will Family First consider coalition tickets in state elections with other minor right parties?
Look, we're open to considering all of those sort of things. We don't have a particular plan at the moment. I don't think we need to at the South Australian election or the upcoming New South Wales election, because the quotas for upper house seats are much lower than say a Senate quota. And so I think we can get there on our own, but we will be talking to people like my friend John Ruddock, like others in South Australia who are like-minded, about just making sure that our preferences help each other. So whoever's going to get there will get there, hopefully on the back of like-minded preferences, so that the votes aren't wasted. The left, as we know, are very good with their preference discipline. That's why Labor always get a flow on from the Greens. We've just got to make sure that on the centre right in the minor party space that our preferences flow. And the figures that you put up at the start of the show about how we did, obviously we got a good preference flow, which put Family First into 8th position at the federal election. And again, I think that message is starting to get through. So I think there's a little bit of a fragmentation on our side, but if we make sure that we preference the right people, we can make sure that our votes are not wasted.
Yeah, I think the left are terrified with the result of Warwick Stacey and how many preferences he saw come his way. I think they're all looking at each other going, the barbarians are starting to learn. We better start getting worried. But, mate, thanks for coming on tonight. Now, it's the final segment. This is the most important part of the show. It's called Build Your Own Fantasy Government. Now, Lyle, you're in charge of the next Parliament of Australia, and you can choose 5 or 6 people to lead up that next government of Australia. They can be living or dead. They don't have to be politicians. They can be anyone that you choose. But who do you pick?
Well, look, I would certainly pick Matt Canavan and Alex Antic. I think they're both outstanding men. And they're in the Liberal and the National parties, and they're completely ignored by the hierarchy. But I think they're very competent people. Living or dead, I think you'd have to have John Howard. I'd have John Anderson in there. I would have, someone like Claire Chandler, who's Liberal Senator from Tasmania. Just trying to think who else. I've got 4 or 5 there. I think Bronwyn Bishop speaks a lot of common sense these days and is much underrated and badly maligned. So I think in terms of, if you're thinking about assembling a cabinet government, I think, you wouldn't go wrong with those names.
John the Boy says, got to pick Bernie Finn.
Yep. No, that's an oversight. Look, Bernie's a good friend, and he gave it his all as our lead Senate candidate in Victoria. But Bernie is he's a man of incredible common sense, and he's fearless. But he'd be great there, and he's had a lot of parliamentary experience as well. Moira Deeming, yes, I see, absolutely. And Moira's a good friend. Yep.
That's the greatest thing for me doing this podcast, is the chance to get to speak to people like yourself, but also Bernie Finn. I've had him on previously in the past. And I mean, living here in New South Wales, you don't really focus on Victorian politics all that much. But now that I do this, I can. And speaking with Bernie, he quickly became one of my favorite politicians. He's fantastic. He's a great addition to Family First as well.
We're very blessed to have him. It's been a delight. It's been a couple of years. We've had a great association. I was really disappointed that he didn't get over the line. And the reason he didn't, we had a very good preference deal with the Liberals. They came to us and offered, to put Bernie number 2 in the Senate. But the swing to Labor was so strong, it just meant that strong Liberal preference flow wasn't able to get Bernie there. And look, that's just, when the swing's on, the swing's on. But had it been a more conventional election with Liberal preferences, Bernie could well have been in the Senate.
And the Victorian state election is a completely different system than the federal system. And in his area, which I think is Metro West.
Metro West, correct.
Yeah, he polled in the 4s and 5s. So he's still in the running if he can hang around to the next Victorian election, and it's going to be very interesting.
Well, look, I'm seeing Bernie this week. We're having a debrief with our team in Adelaide on Friday. But I hope Bernie doesn't mind me saying this on your podcast. But I'm really hoping that Bernie, will run for us again at the state election, because I think he will do well. He lives in Western metropolitan Melbourne. He's well known there. And I think he's got plenty of juice in the tank and plenty to offer Australian politics, even if it is back in the Victorian Parliament, because we just need that common sense back in public life again.
Yep, let's hope so, mate. So just to remind everyone, they can head to the Family First website, familyfirstparty.org.au. Check out the policies. A lot of it's what we've talked about tonight, and keep up to date with everything that they're doing. Also, their national convention coming up, as Lyle said before. And if you want to follow Lyle, head to his website, or you can also follow him on X at Lyle Shelton. So thanks for coming on, mate. Much appreciated. Good to talk to you, and hopefully we can keep up to date with everything that you're doing, and maybe reach out to you again at some point and have you back on.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege.
Great, thank you. And thank you everyone for watching. We've had a lot of interaction in the chat tonight, so thank you for everyone doing that, and hope you enjoyed it. Please share it far and wide so everyone can learn more about great candidates and parties like Lyle and Family First, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.